Hey there folks, Galactic Sex here, coming back to you with another video. This time I've got a little pickups video to show you. I just got a few, this is my cat meowing. My cat wants intimacy. She's like that when I feed her. And the dogs start barking. My neighbor's dogs. Shit.
Took crops to Joplin through the pass, got there and back on a gallon of gas. Drove to the mountains to hunt and fish, took all our gear and our hound dog, Tish. Overhead cam and 4-speed stick, hauling these plants ain't no trick. Me and my Datsun don't waste no time, just keep on moving on down the line. Datsun Little Hustler, America's #1 selling small truck.
So, as I was saying, I got some big box PC games, and I got them for reasonably cheap from a guy in the local retro forums. So this to the Masterpiece Edition and the Riven. I never played these games. I played a little bit Myst back in the day when it was first released, and it was the very first edition. And back then I didn't like it. I didn't like the game because it was, although it was impressive from a technical standpoint, the quality of the video and the quality of the multimedia was quite bad, especially with my underpowered machine I had back then. I don't remember, I had a 486 machine, but it was the SX variant, 486 SX, that lacked the math code processor, and it had it was underpowered. It had very slow CD-ROM, and the video was choppy, and it had a Sound Blaster compatible card that produced mediocre sound, and so my impressions were not the best. And but now, of course, you can find this enhanced edition with better color, better graphics, more fluid video, and better resolutions. You can find it for very cheap on Steam and on Good Old Games. But it's nice to have a physical copy, have a big box copy. And I think these games, I bought 6 games for 50 euros, so I think it's a good deal. Although these oldest games, some of them have just a few floppy disks in them, so if you take into account how small the games were back then, all you get is the cardboard and the manuals, and but they are properly old. They are properly 90s games, so I guess they're a reasonable they are reasonably worthy to be in a games collection. Now the contents of these games are not impressive. The Myst has only a standard jewel case, 1 CD, and a little pamphlet. a few pages of the manual, and but Riven is more impressive. It has I think it has six CD-ROMs. It's for Windows 95. Not even Windows 98. This goes to show you how old are these games. Windows 95 and Mac OS. I think Mac OS 7 or 8 was back then. It was before the transition to Mac OS X, Mac OS 10, which was Unix based. Anyway, these are the contents of the games. And of course, the Mist was one of the very first CD-based games that ushered the multimedia era on the PC, and essentially it made a lot of people, myself including, it made us buy a Sound Blaster compatible card and an internal CD-ROM just to play those impressive games with our full motion video, and it was a really revolutionary time for gaming in general. The third game I got is an enhanced version of XWing. I believe this is the first space combat simulation by LucasArts, which was LucasArts games. Which of course now doesn't exist. It's a pity that LucasArts doesn't make games anymore. So this package contains the basic game, plus 2 expansions, XWing and Imperial Pursuit. And as with all the other games, it's in great condition. Some would call it very good, not mint condition, because there are some creases, some corners that are been repaired by Scotch tape. But generally, all the boxes came intact, in excellent condition. So these are the it's into, I want to say it's 1.44 megs of floppy disks. It's high density floppies. This is the first expansion, and the other one. And the main game consists of five floppies. So of course you had to install it. It was one of the first games that you really needed a hard disk to play. And the manual is not so impressive. It's just there. It describes basic functions, the simulation. And some specific information about the different kinds of ships. This XWing was very weird when I saw it. I don't remember which movie. I think it was the second Star Wars film that introduced the XWing, if I'm not mistaken. It was a very, very weird ship. Good times, good days when the Star Wars movies didn't suck. Good old days. Next we have UFO. Enemy Unknown. It is the original UFO strategy game, the very first one by Microprose, and I can't even begin to count the hours that I've sunk in this game back when it came in the early 90s. I was a student back then with ample time at my disposal, so I remember this game was revolutionary. It was extraordinary. The things you could do and the level of sophistication and the depth, the strategic depth. It's actually, in some aspects, it's deeper than the newer, the most recent UFO games, which of course are much more visually appealing, but these games, the UFO games, and the second one, the Terror from the Deep, which I also want to get, are still worth playing today. And there is a hefty manual. It's necessary to explain all the strategies of the game. And of course, a later version of the game, the original game, had a full, better box art. But this is very hard to find and very expensive. So this is the next best thing. Also check out how little of the CD-ROM is used for the game. Not even half. It's about 150 to 200 megabytes, the whole game. So that goes to show you how complicated and very satisfying and sophisticated games, I'm sorry, can be made for very little data. And today we have all these monstrous machines, meaning how powerful they are. They are like supercomputers. Each one of us has a supercomputer in their house, and still we have games that are perhaps less deep and less enjoyable than all those early games. Now this game is properly original. I mean, it's the very first edition of the PC version. It comes in only one floppy disk, a single floppy disk. It's Frontier Elite 2. And you see, despite those little small flaws on the corners, the box is in excellent condition after all those years, 20 or more years later. And yes, this is quite an impressive game for its time, and it really stressed the machines. I remember I had bought an AMD 486 DX4 processor at the incredible speed of 100 megahertz instead of an Intel Pentium, which were very expensive at the time, and so I would be able to play this game, which is one of the games that is used today in the Amiga 500 as a benchmark for all those expansion cards, those accelerators for the Amiga 500. Yes, it was a very demanding 3D game for its time, and it's only one, a single floppy disk. And what's really nice about this game is that it has a something like a brief getting starting guide, gazetteer, to get you as an introduction to the game. It has a proper it has a proper manual, which is very hefty, to show you all the different aspects of the game: the fighting, the trading, mining, exploration, and it just scratches the surface with all these games. You really need something like a strategy guide to walk you through all the details of the simulation. And back then, when we usually got the games pirated, we copied the copy of the copy and distributed around our small network of pupils or later students at the college or the university. That was the way we shared the games. Yes. We were happy little pirates back then. And when one of us actually bought a game, it was a big deal, because boxed games were quite expensive. But what's more interesting about the game, the packaging, is the inclusion of this little book, Stories of Life on the Frontier, which is a collection of small science fiction novels inspired, based on the universe of Elite. And I suspect it would be very interesting reading, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, you don't find these things now in the games. You just get a manual if you are lucky. You get this with collector's editions. Back then we didn't have collector's editions, we didn't have DLCs, we didn't have one-day patches. Everything was simpler, It was nice. Of course, you didn't have the internet and the luxury of having every piece of information at your fingertips, but it was what it was. Maybe I'm looking at that period of time with the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia, but I remember very fondly of these years when I first played these games, and now I'm I would say I'm happy. If not happy, at least content to have these games in all their glory in my humble collection. And the last game, last but certainly not least, is this game over here, Sim Earth. And Sim Earth was perhaps one of the most impressive simulation games of the early 90s. You had Sim City and Sim Ant. You have the simulation of an ant colony, but this game was very ambitious. The simulation of the whole planetary ecosystem. You could play in different scenarios. You could control the evolution of the Earth or another type of planet, and you could steer the evolution of the planet, the geological, the climate changes, and the introduction of life, of biomass on the planet, and the subsequent rise of civilizations of sentient life forms. And it's a really tough game. I never got very far into this because it was without proper instructions. It was very difficult, and this is one of the games that contained both 5 1/4 discs and 3 1/2, and it has an equally impressive and very beautiful manual, which is an entire book, describing every aspect of the simulation, from the very beginning to very advanced tactics. It goes you through all the different menus and functions, etc. But what's really interesting about this is that about 1/3 of the book is an actual educational section that is of course targeted to students, young students, and it's an introduction to earth science, which is essentially everything that contributes to the formation and evolution of a planet, the geological the geological structure of a planet, how the orbit and the rotation of the planet affect the climate, and all this stuff, which is really, really nice. And it ends up with a very nice, a very impressive chart that's essentially the entire scope of the simulation. Everything, every factor in this diagram is simulated in this game, beginning from the formation of the planet, the volcanoes, the land masses, the water masses, earthquakes, lava, magma, etc. It goes to the climate, the temperatures, the currents of the sea, hurricanes, greenhouse effect, the atmosphere. So you go from geology to the atmosphere, the catalyst, which is the sun, and how it affects the whole ecosystem. And this goes to the biomass with the plants and animals, and finally this all leads to the animal evolution and the appearance of sentient beings and the dawn of civilization and technology. It's really impressive. Again, generally we seem to be forgetting what incredibly sophisticated games, simulation and strategy games we had back then. Everyone seems to be talking nowadays about the casual games, the Nintendo games, the NES games, platforming, and the early shoot 'em up, the arcade games. But for me, these games are more important because I grew up with these games personally. They mean more to me. Of course, if my first acquaintance with the world of gaming was a Nintendo, of course I would be biased towards the Nintendo, but I grew up with a PC, and the first games I played were graphical adventures, and this type of simulations and strategy games. So I really appreciate that.
Jump up and down, shut your eyes and whirl around. Reach out your hand and if no one's there, grab your own hand, dance round in a square.
So I was ready to go and edit this video when this package arrived, and I've been expecting this from an eBay auction. This little box contains 35 PSP games, Japanese PSP games. The bad thing is that it has only the UMD discs of the game and not the cases or the manuals. But I got it for cheap, for 40 bucks, of which 10 or 12, I don't remember, was postal costs from the UK. So I think it was a good deal, and I would have paid much less, about 20 bucks, 20 euros, if it weren't for an unfortunate bidder at the very last minute who made a bid and doubled the cost. But I still think it's a good game. About half of these games I identified their names there, and I found their PAL equivalent. But some of them I really have to play them on to put them on the PSP. And I don't have the time for that now. And of course, some of them are, I suspect that they are, in Japanese, and the language barrier is gonna be hard to. It's gonna be hard, and some games may be unplayable. But it's nice. With this small package, I nearly doubled the PSP games that I have about 40 PSP games, and now I have about 70-75 of them. So it's a nice thing to have. The thing is, where am I gonna find? I don't want to leave them like this. I want to put them in the cases, and one solution is to just put them in a typical, cheap, common DVD case. And but I really want to buy proper PSP cases. Well, the thing is that if I buy 35 PSP cases, empty PSP cases, it's gonna be as expensive as getting those games. But I think I will do it. I will get those cases because I want to put them in a proper case and print their beautiful covers, because the Japanese versions have beautiful covers, and I want them to display them properly on my shelf. So that's it, folks. It's a little pickups video, and until next time, take care of yourselves. Bye.